nutritionist, strength coach, and the co founder of Netsun Wellness. Our guest today on the Settle or Be Better podcast is Nidhi Ma'am, who's going to be talking to us about the forgotten health practices in our tradition in India. So, welcome, Nidhi Ma'am, and over to you. Why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about your fitness story and how has it been for you so far?
Okay, thanks a lot for having me. My fitness journey has been a long one. I'd say I started working out when I was 17, so it's been 22 years. Um, I've been professionally into it for the last 17-ish years. The clinical practice has been there for 14 years. So I've seen trends come in and go. I've seen fad diets come and go. Um, Personally, the my personal journey has also been changing. It's been transformative. I don't think there's a straight line towards achieving your goals. I think the line is kind of goes up and down and zigzag all around. So yeah, that's been the journey.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And for the ones who follow Nidhi ma'am, you know that you'd see so many of these amazing health practices that she talk about that we probably might have not even heard about before, or we might have heard our parents or grandparents talk about at some point in our life, but we don't really see a lot of people practicing these. And she plays a role in reminding us of all of these practices. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. Why don't we get right to the topic and divide these practices into three different parts? Okay, so first is the movement. What are some movement practices or some exercises that we have forgotten over the years, which would really help us bring it back into a routine? The second is in terms of nutrition or cooking, the way we cook our food. How has that changed, and how have you inculcated these old practices efficient? And the third is the space, the environment, our house where we live in, and our lifestyle in general. So let's talk about these practices in these three parts.
Okay, so I'll start with movement. Over years, I think we've all seen what happened in the West, and we've kind of inclined towards weight training. And although I am personally a fan of going to the gym and doing lifting and lifting heavy weights, there's no denying of the benefits of it. And I'm 100% for it, and I'm a huge advocate of it. But I think leaning like having a healthy mix of all both the modern and the traditional is personally something that works for me. I'm not saying that you can't achieve 100% uh, wellness. I would say I'm not talking about aesthetic muscular strength right now. uh, of course, if you need aesthetic muscular strength, then you have to focus on a specific exercise to to make sure that there's targeted hypertrophy of a particular muscle. For that, of course, you need to go to the gym. But if you're looking out for like general wellness or just being strong, even if you're looking for strengthening your bones, I think even yoga alone would do the trick. But there is a catch to it. Practicing it yourself when you're not with the teacher. And this is especially for women who are naturally more flexible. You can get into a posture and it can look perfect on the outside while you might not be engaging the right muscles to do it. So, my personal recommendation is if you want to try the yoga path, you want to go for our traditional practices, do attach yourself with a guru so that they can check on what's happening and you can really benefit from the holistic idea of it. Secondly, when it comes to as I said, the gym is for aesthetics. I'm not denying that there is no health benefit to it, but yeah, if your target, if your goal is purely aesthetics, then that's the way to go about it. And when we talk about yoga, our idea of yoga is, oh, it's that, what we see on Instagram, these fancy ass yoga pants, everyone getting into these perfect postures, perfect bodies. Now, although there is an element of asana practice in yoga, that's one part of it. I'd say that's 1/8 of what yoga talks about. Basically, when we talk about yoga, it's the whole lifestyle. And there is a movement aspect to yoga, which the idea of that movement aspect is to like to build that mind body connection. When you don't have control over your body, you will not be able to control your mind. So that That's the reason why you do physical practice. It's also a means to control your mind. So it's a beautiful practice. It doesn't end there. It doesn't end at just Surya Namaskar. It doesn't end at just getting the posture right. It's a starting point, right? There's also a element of breath in it. There's also element of drishti in it where your concentration should be. And there's also an element of where you should be focused on your body. And that you do through bandha. So one yoga posture as you would see it on online or in a picture is not a representation of what is happening inside the body. There is a lot happening there. There's breathing happening there, there's movement happening there, there is concentration, which is different for each posture. And also there is bandha, which is different for each posture, where you should be feeling where's your center of control in that particular posture. So there is, like, I could go on, and this could be like a 7-day podcast if we talk about it. But yeah, in if I could give you a gist of it, there is so much to our traditional yoga practice that we have just like touched the ice, like the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more. But if you live in the modern world, a healthy mix of traditional and modern can work well for you. So that's how I will. If you have anything to add or question.
Absolutely. And I think you can also shed some light in movement in terms of a lifestyle in general. Like earlier, how there was so many different kinds of activities naturally involved into the routine. Like say for example, even sitting on the floor, standing up from the
Mhm.
floor is something that is really missing, and we can see people in their like 40s or 50s, that's a very young age, not being able to do that without support. So if you could just talk a little bit about movement in that aspect as well.
Well, luckily for us, I think there's a lot of focus on movement. So you have all these things like animal flow. There is mobility workouts that are kind of trending. If you look at Again, if you look at traditional yoga practice, this is all kind of inbuilt. But now you're seeing modern versions of these things. See, with the modern lifestyle, there are a lot of things which are very unnatural to us. Like right now, we both are sitting. I don't know how you're sitting, probably on a chair. I'm also sitting on the chair, but I'm sitting cross-legged because I'm sitting in a bigger chair where I have the option of sitting in Padmasana in the chair. Now I do it, and sometimes in a very traditional business setting, it can come across as very rude that you put your feet up. But this is natural for my body. And as I do this, I'm able to sit with my spine straight, my shoulders are rolled back where they should be. But if I was sitting down, half of the time my feet won't touch the floor properly, I won't be aligned. Your knees below your hips is a very unnatural position. It's not good for your posture, it's not good for your hip flexors. We all have weak hip flexors because of sitting on the chair. So definitely we need to go back a little bit to older cultures. And I'm not saying just Indian culture. If you look at even Japanese culture, there is no concept of high furniture in Japanese culture. You sit down on the floor, they're sleeping on the floor. Their eating table is also like probably a foot high. You have to sit down and eat. So yeah, these are things we think we've modernized and evolved, but I think we're kind of going back. We need to kind of bring some of these practices back, even if you're like sitting in the office, and if you have the luxury to, please try to cross your legs and sit as much as you can, because this is natural to you. This is where your spine aligns the best. So yeah.
Absolutely. And today, with work from home, we have so much space to, hold that and to do all of these things, include these things. But that is what is happening, that instead of doing that, we are, a lot of us are leaning towards becoming a lot lazier. The posture is going down, sitting on the sofa with our laptops the whole day, like sitting for like hours on the go and just getting up, for the washroom or to have water or just for some meals. And that's how the whole day goes sedentary at one place and the posture really goes bad. But these are some really great
Yeah.
insights that a lot of us can start including. That was really lovely. And moving on to the next aspect of it is the nutritional cooking aspect, and I've seen you talk about some really interesting ways of the way you cook your meals and the right ways to approach it. That's something that we've forgotten with the microwaves and the air fryers, and obviously these things make it easier for us because a lot of people might not find the time to really put in so much effort in each and every meal of their day. These things do make it easier, but what are some other things that you personally also make sure that every day you cook in a certain way, or your nutrition is in a certain way that has, been rooted in the older health practices?
Uh, See, we do have to acknowledge the fact that we can't do things 100% as they were in the past, because uh, primarily we had a designated person who was there to just cook meals. We lived in bigger families where you had women taking care of the kitchen, and that too, everyone had their designated job to do. And we don't have that luxury anymore. So most of us either stay alone or with our partners or with probably one child. You really have to be multitasking. I mean, I do stay in India and have the luxury of help around the house where I can order in, and someone else can cook for me. But that's not possible for a lot of people who are either staying abroad, or it's not feasible for them to get help for. So you can't be 100% what you can't follow the 100% ancient practices, so you have to find a middle path. Now, this is something which is very like debatable, like should you what level should you be going to, but as a thumb rule, let's say try to stick to whole food plant-based diet. Right, when I say whole food plant-based diet, doesn't mean raw vegan or anything. It basically means having less, like to start with scratch. So unprocessed, getting unprocessed dals, getting unprocessed millets, getting as much as unprocessed as you can. Your atta can be like multigrain or mixed with things. Now these are some starting points, these are some great starting points, but what do I mean by processed stuff? Would be like you go and buy store bought hummus, you go and buy store bought rotis, store bought tahini, you know, just your basic stuff. Store bought chutneys, ketchups, store bought pickles. These are things which are obviously avoidable. Again, I'm not even touching upon packed food because that's completely a no no. Now with that done, you would still have to make some changes which are like uh, practical, right? So mixing up your attas with something. There are some interesting products also that are coming in the market. Not all products which are packed are also bad. So there are some interesting products that are coming. Sattu is back in action. You see a lot of jowar, bajra coming back. Millets are suddenly trending. So there are a lot of things which are coming back, and one should like try to break our mental norms and try to go back to these foods because it's not super difficult. But next, the problem comes in is that I don't have time to cook. What do I do with it? Now, meal prep is something that's really frowned upon, because people outside of India do it, and in even in our culture, as per Ayurveda and even as per yoga, food that's cooked beyond 4 to 5 hours is considered tamasic, right? So ideally, one should not be meal prepping, but you can meal prep smart. To add prana back into life, you can always add like a spice or a little bit of chalk. So even if you're somebody who meal preps, you don't have to meal prep the whole food and keep it in boxes. You can smartly meal prep and say pre-cook things, keep it, and you do the final assemble fresh. So you can do assembling of your food in like 10-15 minutes or less, and you can add prana back into life. So I think even if we this is something that I coach, and this is something that I uh, you know tell my clients and figure out ways with them, sit with them and figure out ways to like figure out the whole process of like making the food still sattvic, but letting um, the time saving element be a part of it as well. So yeah, I mean there are ways around it, but it requires planning, it requires some bit of thought into it.
Absolutely. Understood. And in terms of cooking specifically, is there something that you have, included consciously into your lifestyle or change it, in terms of like what kind of utensils you use and, in something in that sort of a way?
See, the safety aspect of your utensils is something that you should consider. And now there is again a lot of conversations happen which are very generic. Okay, don't have aluminium, don't cook in aluminium. Um, Suddenly we go, oh, we'll throw all of that. Then some study says and comes, oh, non-stick is great, and then you next day you hear non-stick is toxic, so throw everything out. Although I am a huge fan of using the traditional cookware, I have a lot of cast iron. Huge fan of that. It's a great way to passively add like more iron to your diet very easily. And I do practice that. But again, you don't have to throw things out. Just be mindful of what combinations don't work. So if you have a cheap non-stick that is damaged, of course you should throw it. But if you have something that was good quality and you've maintained it well, you can go on to use it. So you're not going to do anything good to earth or yourself or your environment by just throwing everything and buying a new set of stuff. So be practical with it. I mean, as much as it makes sense to go back to cast iron and with these pital utensils, but again, there needs to be, you need to educate yourself of what I cook, how I cook it. Will this work? Will this not work? How can I use it in the best possible way? So I think it's a journey. One shouldn't try to like jump onto it. Anyone who's telling you right off the bat also that, oh, this is all bad, is also jumping onto a trend, and they will probably switch their opinion 5 years down the line when something comes up from another study that comes up 5 years later. So yeah, I think one must follow it, but one must not like overdo it. So find your middle path, find what works for you. And I think the ingredients that you put in, how you cook, how you consume, your whole lifestyle will matter more than just these one or two aspects where you're required to shop something and throw something out.
Absolutely. And that is one of the major issues today, that whatever you're searching for, you'll find studies backing that up. So if you search for benefits of something, you'll find the studies backing that up. If you search for the, disadvantages of something, you will find that. And it's always this, debate happening in your mind, and so misleading at times. And also when it comes to, these aspects of, these older health practices, that is what happens, that we either think of elimination, or it becomes very overwhelming that, oh my god, I need to completely change my environment, or I need a whole renovation in whatever's happening in my life
Yeah.
right now. But that's a great way
Yeah.
to go about it, with baby steps. And obviously every time we do need to check with our body, with our lifestyle, whatever works the best for us. So that
Yeah,
was
body,
really well.
lifestyle, budget, timing, you need to be mindful of that because yeah, as you said, there's no perfect moment. There's If you seek perfection, then you're never going to get there. So I think baby steps is the key to go, and seek and you shall find, right? So if you go on to seek like what's wrong with this, what's wrong with that, you will find. I think that the biggest challenge we all face in this day and age of information overload is that we don't have faith in anything, because there's this trend about researched fact, uh, and research is limited. Science is only beginning to explore what has been a practice for thousands of years. So when somebody goes back and say alternative healing, let's just talk about that only. If you talk about alternative healing, and again, there are good and bad people doing it. I would not say something works 100%, this doesn't work. I'm not against modern medicine, but I'm just saying that there are um, modern medicine is also like modern, it's just evolved. So it doesn't necessarily mean that would 100% work for you. The biggest element of anything that will work for you is faith. So if you overboard yourself with too much happening from here, too much coming from here, research from here, you might as well just be in a space where you lost your faith, and that's the worst place to be. So pick up one thing, try and do it 100%, then don't question it,
Right.
because life is
Absolutely.
going to force you to, like, the information overload is going to force you to like question everything, and that's quite a weird space to be in.
True. True. That was really well explained, and I'm sure that solved a lot of questions for our listeners. Moving on to the the third aspect of these practices is the space that we live in. Like, it's not just something where we come and sit with our family, or we come after work and sleep, and we go and leave the house and go to work next day. We do have a relationship with the space we live in, and that's often forgotten about, and we just treat it as like, okay, I have a house, I have a place to go for shelter. Like, that's what happens. And this relationship with our space is, often forgotten about. So, in terms of that, in our living environments, obviously there might be some elimination involved. But apart from that, what else are the things that you personally do from these practices that help you maintain a good relationship with the space that you live in, and overall make a greater impact on your lifestyle with these changes?
See, different cultures have touched upon this subject differently. We know that minimalism is something that's very Asian. There's a huge conversation about how clutter affects your brain, how decluttering your space will give you mental clarity. So there is thought around that. In even our yoga practice, there is concept about clearing the space. Is those are not exactly the words that are said, but we know that you're supposed to, in your dincharya, you're supposed to like pray in the morning and then clean your space with something like a dhoop or an agarbatti, or burn something. In South American cultures, you have sage. You sage the house. So all these are practices that are meant to clear your space. You have havan, right? You enter a new space and you do havan. There's scientific evidence to that. There is a reason why you do that. Now, if you talk about the spiritual aspect, your space also has energy, right? Half of that energy is derived from you, and you add energy to the space. So, being mindful of clutter, being mindful of unnecessary objects that are there around you. If you need them, keep them. If you don't need them, throw it out. Believe it or not, it does hold mental space. If you want clarity, you need to have a good space. One practice that I've followed for years is that I wake up and make my bed. Instantly I am closing the whole process of that I slept. But B, I whenever I walk back to my room, say if you're working from home, or at the end of the evening when I walk into my room to sleep, I get a bed that's made. And that's a more welcoming space than a cluttered bed where I've just thrown the sheets and the pillows are lying wherever they're lying. So imagine what's the feeling that's triggered in both the situations. If I am retiring and I'm going to bed and I have this clean bed which is nicely made, I'll probably like pick up a lavender spray it down. I'm already preparing for sleep in a good mode. While I'm going into my subconscious, I'm already going in peace. And if I enter into clutter where my bed has all sorts of things lying on it, there are books lying on it, there's a computer, there are phones lying around, and it's dirty, I'm entering my resting space with a dirty mind. So, space is definitely something that has a huge impact on how we feel about ourselves. So, I think there's a lot of conversation in Asian cultures about this thing, and they all work. So, one must be mindful of our space. Like the first thing I do every morning when I set up my workstation is that I come and clean up and I remove anything unnecessary. So, if I have to work on a project, only the things that are relevant to the project need to be on the table. Everything else needs to be out. And I think that really helps you to focus. So I think everyone can use these practices. So it's quite,
Absolutely, and it's not as difficult as one might think it might be to make these little changes day by day. You don't have to go all in on day one because that might be setting yourself up for failure in just a week. But you can take these smaller steps, and I mean, I don't think we Indians really need to push this thing in terms of our space, because from our childhood a lot of our parents have been telling us this, and at that age we might have despised it, and you were like, I don't want to do that, and I want to be cool, and my messy room is where I be creative, and all of those kind of thoughts, but it is a lot easier for us because it's not a foreign concept. It's something that we have seen our parents, our grandparents, and everyone in our family
yeah.
talk about. And now that we know that what space that holds for us, so it's really a great way to go about it. So thank you for that. That was really insightful. Now we know that what are some practices that we should and we can include in our lifestyles, and enrich it in some or the other way, because it's the need of the hour right now, because we need these anchors to hold us down. And for us, when we are like all over the place, when we are stressed about some things, these practices can really help us ground ourselves and be there for us when our life might be a little messy. But coming to the topic of some practices or some behaviors that we need to unlearn, what are your thoughts on that? Because that is something, some things that might have worked earlier, it's not like it might work right now for us. Something that might have worked for parents in their generation might not work for us right now. And I think it's also more in terms of the mindset uh, than just some practices. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of conditioning is what we need to unlearn. Um, but it's more like, you know, I'm going to talk about only generations above us. So I'm going to talk about people who are like baby boomers, and I'm a millennial. So maybe millennials and baby boomers were too reliant on modern science. So they went by what's the current, right? Uh, and I'm not talking about the generation before that. So I think that the only thing that they were too focused on was science and modern and all of that. So I think we can unlearn a bit of that and go back to a bit of traditional. That's one thing. The other thing is that now these are two extremes. There was one thing that was very good in that generation of millennials and baby boomers, which was they had tremendous discipline, right? So much so that to some extent, when the new generation came in, and talking about Gen Z and younger, they find that there was no emotional aspect that was covered in their upbringing. Because I grew up in a family where discipline was everything, right? So the baby boomers were also very disciplined. So you had to wake up at a certain time. You have to do whatever, whether you feel like it or not. You have to go to work, whether you feel like it or not. You have to go and train for it. You have to study. They were very strict about discipline. There was a huge emphasis on it. There wasn't a lot of conversation about mental health. And then cut to the new generation, Gen Z and the younger one. They're a lot into emotions. They are 100% about emotion. I'm not feeling it. I'm not going to do it. If I don't feel for it, I'm not going to do it. So I think these are two very extreme ends of the paradigm. And in somewhere, we have to unlearn both of these and find a middle path. Because as much as it's important to know what you're feeling, when you oversensitize yourself, you fall in the victim mode. And if you don't have enough discipline in your life, that's a recipe for disaster. So the discipline that the previous generations had was great, as it was an anchor to fall back when things were not going well for us. Unfortunately for them, they were not in a space where they had a lot of opportunity or a lot of conversation about feelings. So they missed out on that. But the newer generation's all about that. I'm not feeling it. You can't talk like that. How did you talk to me like this? They sometimes even don't see what benefits they can have if they push themselves beyond their own mindset of I'm not feeling it right now, because the previous generation did that beautifully. So I think we need to marry these two extreme schools of thought when it comes to our discipline, and especially how we should lead our life. Though I think this is something that one can definitely learn from.
Absolutely. That was quite an interesting take on this particular topic, because there is this conflict happening in a lot of families, like whether it is with us and our parents, and in almost each and every family, we have had this little conflict, and it always becomes difficult in which direction to go. But to find that balance is something that would be the key to, your relationship with your family and your personal life as well. So that was a great insight. And this was an amazing episode. I'm sure that our listeners have a lot of takeaways from this. So thank you for gracing our podcast today. As we conclude, do you have any last thoughts or messages for our audience?
Mm, I only say that, as we are progressing towards more and more information, as we are progressing towards more and more apps and AI and all of that, I think something that's constantly happening to us is that we're becoming restless, um, unintentional, very distracted. And this is something we're practicing a couple of hours in a day. So I think we're going to get very good at this 5 years down the line. So something that I would request everyone to do is have a few time slots in your day where you lead a distraction free life. And this could be dropping your phone in the locker while you're working out, keeping that 1 hour of yoga without a screen around you if you work with a teacher, or if you even work with yourself and you know what flow it is, just probably write it on a piece of paper and not have a screen around you. Or it could be also your meal time. It could be the first hour that you wake up and read a book. But practice undistracted time. Because in this age of 15-second short form videos, uh, we are practicing distraction at a rate that is completely unhealthy. We are this multitasking culture, and of doing too many things together is somewhere uh, it's quite damaging to our inner self. We're more anxious because of that, because we don't have that patience of like sitting and focusing on one thing. And this doesn't necessarily be to be like a workout or a meditation session or a book reading. You could even spend 15 minutes and watch a sunset or sunrise. That's also meditative. But I think all of us need to do, for our mental health and our overall well being, have undistracted time slots with ourselves.
Absolutely. That was a lovely message. And it's so true, like I am personally guilty of that as well because I'm not someone who often practices yoga, but there are those days when I feel like my body needs a really good stretch and I really need this at this towards the end of the week, say, because I am a lot more into strength training. And then I would, do that at my home and put up a video on my screen. Or else, if I know something that this is what I want to work on, there's usually a need for music to play somewhere. Or, like there's there's something that is needed in that kind of that space, that 1 hour that I want to listen to something when I'm doing that. And a lot of people also listen to podcasts while doing all of these things. So actually, and towards the end of the day, we just sleep with so many things happening all over the day, and we don't even realize that we didn't take out those few minutes of time for ourselves. So that is really insightful, and it's true. Like a lot of us do go through this, unknowingly, and it'll be a lovely way to be conscious about it. So thank you for sharing that with us. It was a lovely episode. And for the ones who'd like to know more about all these topics and a lot more, you can follow Nidhi ma'am. The details in the description below. And do reach out to her, probably also train with her and learn a lot more from her. Also, if you want some amazing morning routine motivation, and if you're confused about what to do about your early mornings and a compelling way to go about it, then you can also look at Nidhi ma'am's profile and what she has been including, because that's something really interesting. I mean, even I saw your recent post about your whole morning routine, and I was like, wow. I mean, there are so many things that you're including, and if I plan it in that kind of a way, then I'll be more compelled to wake up and do those things if I have that plan in. Like, thank you for sharing that with us. And that's it for today's episode. I'm Sakshi Pawar, and I'll be your host for the Settle or Be Better podcast. So stay tuned while we bring more inspiring stories. You know the drill. Subscribe to the Settle or Be Better podcast, like, share, and comment on our videos. And oh, hit the bell icon because you don't want to miss the mind boggling health discussions we're about to bring for you. Why settle when you can be better?